I am today endorsing Lee Bright for the South Carolina Senate because I think it's incredibly important that he represent y'all down in Columbia. Now, I'm doing so basically for two reasons. One, I said represent y'all down in Columbia. This notion of representing people, which is the way that our republic is built, is a fairly sacred honor. It's a fairly sacred obligation. Because we're at the end of the day not a democracy, we're a republic. Everybody doesn't get to take their vote down to Columbia. One's vote is represented. And I looked at, how he conducted himself there in the school board, which I think is a great bellwether for how one might conduct oneself down in Columbia. I look at the fact that he's a small business person. If you don't listen to folks well as a small business person, you go out of business. And that market dynamic is something we don't oftentimes see enough of in politics. People will go down and supposedly represent something, but they may not be really hearing from them the way that a small business person would. And so the driver for me is this notion of local representation, and I think, I've got to give credit to LB for what he chose to do here in this runoff. Yeah, he said, rather than just sort of sitting by the sidelines, he says, no, I didn't make it, but I think that my views would be best represented in that certain way. And I want to give you credit.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
But whether it's with his endorsement, whether it's in y'all's respective endorsements, the idea of local representation is half the equation for me. The other half, though, is changing Columbia. If you built a transportation company as he is, basically one of the top 25 fastest-growing companies in South Carolina, you've been listening really well to that customer for quite some time. And if you think about this notion of business people, this is no mark against lawyer. I happen not to be a lawyer. But at times we have certain groups overrepresented in Columbia and certain groups underrepresented. I think we need more in the way of small business people involved in the political process at every level, whether that's Washington, D.C., whether that's the State House, or whether that's local government. Because at the end of the day, the listening process goes to small business. I also need people who will make stands, who will be of courage. And I looked at that, standings will make, I guess, in your first year there in the school board, it's saving taxpayers about $500,000 because the consultant, in fact, wasn't needed. Those stands at times can be lonely. There's a lonely walk that goes with pushing for rule reform down in Columbia. But the fact that he's done it before, the fact that he's been brave enough to start a small business on his own, which is truly an act of courage, says to me he can be of courage down in Columbia. I would say that if you look at where we're coming from, we're looking at change in Columbia towards something. And it's changed toward a more conservative operating form. South Carolina government's grown by about 40% over the last 3 years. Did your paycheck or did your wallet grow by 40% over these last 3 years? So that we have a closer tie to what's happening in the underlying economy with what's happening in Columbia. We desperately need to change structure. It's not an easy road. And we're just a couple votes short of in the Senate. For instance, there was a baby step toward changing the way that structure works in Columbia that would have been very, very meaningful. We're the only state in the United States of America with a budget control board. In 49 other states, they do it differently. And yet, we had a bill that would have taken portions of what's called the Budget Control Board, put them into a Department of Administration that's, again, desperately needed us to bring us in line with what the other 49 states are. It unanimously passed the House. Both Republicans and Democrats voted for the bill, and it got hung up over the Senate. Too often times, the dying ground of reform and change is the South Carolina Senate. And so the idea of having somebody of principle, somebody of conservative values, somebody who has walked the walk, somebody who is a business person, I think is incredibly important to bring a change in the Senate and consequently bring a change in South Carolina. It's for all those reasons that I'm here to indeed endorse Here's the big question I'll leave you with, though. I said what I'm doing. Lee said what he's doing. LB said what he's doing. The question is, what are y'all doing? Because in the last week of a primary, it's busy, it's nonstop. He'll go through sleepless nights, work until all hours of the morning, all hours of the night. Amy will be subjected to the same. Kids will be subjected to the same. I hate to say it, but that's what's coming over next week. All that goes with the territory, and it becomes that much more important that every one of you look for ways to redouble your effort. As I understand it, LB's been getting up at crazy hours in the morning to start the campaign process, and I admire that. But the real question is, we get 5 other folks, 10 other folks, 15 other folks to join you, because turnout really matters in these things. I really encourage you to, again, get a couple other folks involved. Change in Columbia, rest of the balance. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Come on, need you over here. We'll get a picture. Oh. Well, I know, we need a picture right here. Come on, y'all.